Toastmaster Club Officers Training program last month was a huge success with 6 of us in attendance. To enable our club members to grow to their potential in as short a period as possible, our club officers look to our Toastmaster toolbox. Tonight, presenting meeting roles and responsibilities in tandem with the Competent Communicator Manual is Joe Buzinski. Sir, will not be without your speech.
Thank you, Lisa. I'd like to start by thanking everybody who brought your Competent Communicator Manual, because for me, that's what this is all about. There's so many resources in there that are easily overlooked. And tonight, I would like to bring your attention to that manual. If you'd all open it up to page 67, where it starts off with the roles of our speakers. Pages 67 through 74 are what I'm going to attempt to cover tonight in an interactive manner. And here's what I'd like for you to do. Find a topic that you're really interested in. I want to be an evaluator. Go to that page. Read about it over the next 30 seconds or a minute. Anywhere in that category between page 67 and 74. There are some other responsibilities within the club, but these are the ones that get you through the first half of being a Toastmaster. I especially challenge the tenured club members who may have a lot of experience at many of these roles to do the same thing, because perhaps there might just be one or two little tidbits that you can pick up. What I'd like to do is just broach a subject such as speaker, the first one. Many of you are probably already looking at that right now. And I would ask that club members volunteer to just read a one-liner, just one line, one sentence, 2 sentences at the most, as something that struck you, something that you had forgotten about, something that you thought would help, something that you just learned about that role. And when you're ready, I'm going to ask for the first club member. Just signal you're ready by raising your hand. I'll call on you. We'll keep this moving fast, and this will be an interactive experience. Eric.
Sit near the front of the room for quick and easy access to the lectern. I find that you want always do that.
Saves time.
Saves time.
Keeps the club on track. Thank you, Eric. Speaker, who's next? If you're in a different section.
If you
Susan.
don't write your own speech introduction, make certain that the Toastmaster of the meeting has prepared a good one for you. And that's a key thing to do.
Excellent. Excellent start. And if you want to jump to a different section of the Competent Communicator, just say what speaking role that you're referring to, such as evaluator, offhand, or speak.
Before your meeting, ask the general evaluator for your evaluator's name. Speak to your evaluator and talk about the manual speech you'll be giving. I think there's value in that.
Thank you, Steve. Steve's been in our club for how long?
3 weeks.
Seems like a lifetime, doesn't it? Eric, you have something else?
To piggyback on what Susan said, what I learned in one of my evaluations is that give the introducer a long introduction that sets up your speech, especially if you're having trouble with time crunch. You get part of your speech done. And I thought that was very valuable.
Excellent point. So what I heard you saying is that if you have a lot of information you're trying to pack into a speech, you can give some of the speech information in your introduction to keep you on track. Outstanding. I'm here with timing a lot.
To telescope on that, Eric's right, you can get an extra paragraph or two in your speech is what it amounts to, but also if you don't write your own introduction, it puts a terrible burden on the Toastmaster, especially when you just say, oh, I don't know, when they ask what your introduction is, and you know, you don't want our Toastmaster to look foolish standing in the front of the room. That's our responsibility to write our own introductions.
I'd say pay attention to your Postmaster magazine that gives you all kinds of helpful hints on gestures, how to stand, and other kinds of information that you get from that magazine.
Body
That helps
language
when you
and
speak.
the Toastmaster magazine. The only magazine I've ever owned besides Parachutist and Paragliding that I read cover to cover. Anybody else have anything about speakers they'd like to discuss? Christina?
I think it's important for the speaker to really read through the
Yeah.
project that they're doing. Look at the objectives they're supposed to be working toward. Focus their speech around those objectives, whether it's body language or speaking in small words, which is really one of the toughest ones in my opinion, or persuasive speech, so that your speech is geared to the objectives on which you're being evaluated.
Right.
Not just
Excellent.
create a speech and say, okay, we'll throw this one in as number 7, and let your evaluator struggle to figure out how to evaluate.
I was tied in. I put down, try to arrive 10 minutes early. I know that sometimes I might be assigned something, and if I come here expecting to do that role, and I show up at the 11th hour, 1 minute beforehand, Lloyd may have assigned that to somebody else, rightfully so, because there's got to be a point. So try and arrive 10 minutes early. If you only get here 5 minutes early, you're still early.
That's for sure. This is one of your notes, but one that I would offer also. Keep your evaluations.
Yeah.
If they're not the sterling comments that you would like to have, don't tear them up, throw them away. Keep your evaluations so you can go back to them and keep improving.
These evaluations right here are incredible. When I did one of my speeches, I went through it, I found all the constructive feedback. I put them in different piles. There were 7 of them. I went and did a presentation for the Fast Pitch program, and when I was evaluated, I didn't make any of those 7 errors. I made a whole other slew of them. But I did grow as a Toastmaster. These are invaluable. Speaking of invaluable, Eric.
Since we're on that, and I don't think this is covered here, really take these little evaluations seriously and really write down your comments. This is not just a scribble thing where we're wasting a minute. Really take this seriously because we do read them and we do want to know how to get better.
Perhaps the most valuable comments would be the constructive, gentle feedback that will help us grow, which is why we're here, which is why we commit an hour every week to be here to improve, to get better. Anybody want to take on the subject of evaluation? Evaluations is kind of a mid to upper level position within our club, something you don't get at your first rodeo. Or maybe we can start with the timer, grammarian, and awe counter. Go ahead, Jack.
Evaluator, when you're an evaluator and you're explaining the duties, you're explaining the objectives. And all you have to do is read that black part in the book. You don't have to read the whole thing and go through all the questions. You just read what the objectives of the speech are.
Okay, something as a new member that kind of puts out to me is saying that talk with the speaker or the leader to find out which manual project he or she will present. Review the project goals and what the speaker or leader hopes to achieve. And if I'm understanding correctly, in other words, whoever's going to be evaluating you, you talk to them and tell them what you're working on, and then what your goals are and really what you're trying to improve
Right.
on so that they can focus on that and give you positive corrective feedback.
Outstanding from our brand new
Newest
member.
member.
Outstanding feedback.
Joe?
Thank you. Yes.
You can also customize your evaluation if you know, the evaluator and the speaker have to work together on this, but if there's some particular thing you're looking for, whether or not it's one of the criteria in the manual, you can ask the evaluator to search for that. Some of you may remember Doug Taylor, a former member of this group, had a very loud, commanding voice, and one thing he always wanted to work on was moderating his voice to fit the room. Well, that was never in the manuals, but he wanted these evaluators to talk about that.
There was one comment I read in here about evaluation. It was, when you're doing an evaluation, you should not be reading the questions
Right.
that are in the evaluation itself. If I'm on the phone talking to a client or my wife or a family member, and you're sitting there across me at a desk, and you can only hear my side of the conversation, I will tell you with a high level of certainty that you know what that other person is saying based on what I'm saying. So save time, keep it within the hour time frame, give us more time for table topics, and don't read the, help me with this please, the questions.
Evaluation, the written evaluation.
Questions.
Criteria.
Yeah, the question evaluation. Christine?
One thing that helps me with that when I'm an evaluator is to take the back of the agenda and write maybe the 2 or 3 points that the evaluation is looking for, or the objectives of the speech. Then I comment under those objectives as I'm listening, give the feedback off of this. Then you can fill in the book with the answers to those specific questions, but for me, that's more helpful way.
That is a wonderful format. I understand what you said, and that's helpful to me. Thank you. Eric?
One of the biggest things about evaluations is we've got these different criteria to fill out. But if you're new at evaluations, just remember that it's your opinion. You're not going to be an expert at this. You're not going to, it's just your opinion of what you thought of the speech. And that can be very helpful because you get lots of different viewpoints and then we can throw out or keep open on.
Thank you. With reference to Table Topics Master, are there some tenured club members that would like to give us a brief comment on pitfalls to avoid for Table Topics? Lloyd?
Yeah, the main one is, a goal should be that everybody who shows up for the meeting gets to speak, whether it's giving a report or a real speech or a table topic. So it's important to call on the people first who do not have meeting roles or speaking assignments and make sure that they get the first crack at everything, and then work your way out to the people who have other roles if there's time.
And that's easily found on our agenda. We updated the meeting. Julie, you have anything you want to say? I'm going to call on you in a minute. Think of something. Yeah.
The question should be asked first before the name
Yeah.
is called upon. And the question should be an open-ended question,
Right.
not a yes or no answer.
Right.
Outstanding. Could you give us an example of an open-ended question, Jack? Or turning a closed-ended question into an open-ended question?
Why are you trying to imitate a paladin of proper Toastmaster techniques?
Yeah.
That is an open-ended question. It's a why. But if somebody hands you a, how do you feel about the paladin situation in Wenatchee? Or excuse me, if someone says to you, do you like the paladin situation in Wenatchee? You're being handed a yes or no question.
Yeah.
Then you, as the person who's being asked that question, just think to yourself, add the words and why to the end of that question, and then give us your opinion on that closed-ended question. So if you get a closed-ended question, you can make it into an open-ended question.
I agree with you. As Toastmasters, we need to do that. We need to be able to make those things. So if you get asked a yes or no question, it's up to you, and part of your table topics training to make that into an open-ended or to expound.
Exactly. One of the other things I thought was really relevant about the Table Topics Master, it said that the Table Topics Master is not there to give a mini-series on talks. And I thought, that doesn't happen often, but if it happens once, then that's once too often.
Your question should be able to fit in one sentence.
Yes.
Another thing is to tailor your questions to the maturity of the members here.
Right.
That if they've been in quite a while, you can ask them a tougher question. And to ask maybe a mid-level member a question that can be answered, and then ask new members if they want to, after it's been demonstrated how it's been done.
Right.
And if you have an absolutely brand new member, you might go and ask them before the meeting, the tabletop, if you feel comfortable with that.
Yep.
Now, we actually started with the more difficult topics, and it got to the point where it was clear that I was going to go until 1/4 and take my 15 minutes because I think there's been value to this. But there are a few people who haven't commented yet, and the good news is we have an opportunity here because we're going to talk about the grammarian, awe counter, and timer, but not in that order. So Rad, put on your thinking caps. Anybody who hasn't spoken yet? Okay. And come up with something for me while Eric or somebody like Eric is commenting on those. Julie.
With the grammarian rule, I really appreciate when people say something very positive about what the speakers have been saying. Oftentimes someone will share a gem that somebody has said, and I really like that. It really stays with me. It's also powerful to learn when there are certain types of grammatical errors, but too many of those I feel sort of punitive and people become uncomfortable with that.
If I was the grammarian, I would write down the word punitive and its use in that sentence and say, and give you that was awesome. I love that. Go ahead.
Well, talking about the awe counter, my worst problem is going and it's so interesting because I've been kind of studying up on the awe counter, and I noticed everybody else now that says I just, I mean, I'm watching TV and I go, oh, he said I'm still doing it, so. Yeah.
It's hard.
Any closing statements before I wrap this up? There's two takeaways. Go ahead.
Just one question, it's just my opinion, but it seems like some people who do table topics, the leader of it actually tells their own story and takes quite a bit of time away from the other speakers.
Mm-hmm.
If they talk for 2 or 3 minutes on their own story instead of giving it to someone else's.
Mm-hmm.
That was the mini speech comment that's written in the Competent Communicator Manual. I concur completely. Yes. Christine.
My thought on all rules and table topics is particularly crucial in this regard. We find out the Friday before who's filling which role, which should be plenty of time to put a little bit of thought into the role, to read about it, whatever the role is, particularly table topics, and put some time into it. The only exception is if we get to a meeting and the table topics master doesn't show up and somebody needs to scramble to 30 questions. Otherwise, by putting a little thought to it, you can make it a lot of fun. And fit it to the theme, and heroes and zeros, show up with some kid mask or something. Do something fun with it to really bring people into it.
One last comment about all of these speaker duties. It really creates some stress if you no-show. Now, there are times when that's inevitable. I mean, you get tied up in business or you have car trouble or whatever. It happens to everybody. But I carry my phone with me. I can get email on my phone. And if at all possible, give me a call or drop an email saying I'm not going to be there. And then Eric and I typically try to fill in all the missing people right at the start of the meeting. But it gets kind of exciting if you don't know, say your table topics master is not yet there and there's just 2 minutes to go.
It was just 5 or 6 minutes before.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to close this with Julie as being the last comment, so we can keep this on track. Sorry, Jackie. I saw you raising your hand already.
Yeah, just back to table topics, just for clarification. I was curious if it's okay for that person to give a small little story, because I find it rather entertaining and somewhat soothing if they say just a little bit before asking the question. I enjoy that. It calms me down and kind of centers me. Not a really long.
You may be at that level where it helps you more than with other people who are up to a bigger challenge, and perhaps when somebody asks you when it comes up in a meeting, or if you know you don't have an assigned role, and you think you're gonna get called on, you know who the table topics master is. You can approach them and say, you know, serve it up soft, give me a intro, you can work with,
If you're uncomfortable with that, you can say pass, and you can say, you know, ask me again, I do want to participate. Number one. Number two, you can have a speaking role if there are no speakers and you know you're going to get to everybody. Then you can practice expounding your speech making in that role, and that's with any role. If it's going to be a light meeting, have as Toastmaster, you can expound your Toastmaster duties and practice speaking too. And as Toastmaster, you can fill that role.
So since we went to Eric, I'm gonna let Jack close this as well.
To piggyback on what Lloyd and Eric were kind of saying, read page 2, a Toastmaster's promise. Page 2, a Toastmaster's promise.
Thank you, Jack. That's all you get, buddy. At this point, I'm going to wrap this up and say briefly that my system is, I keep my Toastmasters manual in my car. On Friday, when Lloyd emails me, I look at what my assignment is. I go out to my car, I get my book, I look at it, I make notes on the agenda as necessary to prepare for the meeting. On Monday, when I come back into work, I go back in and I look at my notes and at my assignment again. I reevaluate, and I come here comfortable, confident, calm, excited, ready to go to do my very best and grow. And in closing, if you would like to be assigned a duty, if there's something that you're ready to step up to that you haven't been asked to do, after the meeting, go to Lloyd and ask him, and he'll set you up with it next week. One last thing is that everybody in the club should have a mentor. If you don't have a mentor, would you raise your hand so we can identify you? It's not a bad thing. 1, 2, 3. So we have 3. Could the 3 of you come up here at the end of the meeting and officers will meet with you, and we'll hook you up with a mentor. Okay? So thank you, everybody. I hope that was valuable to you.